Welcome to Noir Street.
Chapter 1. The safe that smelled like tomorrow Riddle Street has a way of writing letters in invisible ink. Then somebody adds heat, and suddenly your whole week is on fire. If you doubt it, try spending a calm morning in Nero Wolfe's office and watch how fast calm turns into a rumor. It was a bright, cold day, the kind Manhattan produces when it wants to show off its sharp edges. The brownstone on West 35th Street sat solid and self-satisfied, as if it had been built to outlast human foolishness. Inside, the air was warm, the chairs were where they belonged, and the house had the faint, steady perfume of Fritz's kitchen drifting up from below, a promise that civilization still existed and could be eaten at 7:15. Wolfe was behind his desk, of course, occupying the red leather chair as if it were an inheritance. He had already spent his sacred morning hour upstairs with the orchids, and now he was in his second sacred hour reading. It is a wonder he ever solved a crime, since he treated the world like an inconvenience and still managed to bend it into answers. I was at my desk pretending to sort mail. The truth was, I was waiting for the bell, because the bell always rings when Wolfe's mood is settled and ripe for irritation. It rang. I opened the door and found a man standing on the stoop clutching his hat like it was the last honest thing he owned. He was in his late 50s, with a round face turned pale by worry and winter. His coat was good but not new, his shoes were polished but hurried, and his eyes had the fixed look of someone who has been staring at a problem long enough to give it a personality. He said, "Archie Goodwin." "That depends," I told him. "If you came to sell me something, I'm my own cousin." He swallowed. "Caleb Mercer. I own Mercer's department store. I need to see Mr. Wolfe." "Every own needs to see Mr. Wolfe," I said. "Most of them survive the experience. Come in." I took his hat, guided him into the office, and introduced him the way you introduce a man to a judge. Wolfe did not rise. Wolfe rarely rises for anyone who is not a plant, a chef, or an idea. Mercer sat stiffly in the client chair, hatless now, and looking more vulnerable for it. He smelled like worry and winter, but there was a faint undertone that did not belong in a man's coat, not sweat, not cologne, something sweet and costly, too bright for a respectable morning. Wolfe glanced at him once and returned to his book. "Mr. Mercer, you have come without an appointment that suggests desperation or vanity. Which is it?" Mercer's mouth tightened. "Neither. It's my safe." Wolfe's eyes lifted, mildly offended at being asked to care about metal. "Your safe?" Mercer leaned forward. His hands shook slightly, but he tried to keep them still by gripping his knees. "It smells like expensive perfume. Not my wife's, not my daughter's, nobody's," I said. "Could be a clerk playing Cupid." Mercer looked at me as if I had offered him a joke at a funeral. "Number it's inside the safe. The lining like it seeped into the fabric." Wolfe closed his book with slow precision, the way he did when he had decided to tolerate a human problem. A scent that penetrates a lined safe is either deliberate or foolish, and deliberate things are rarely foolish. Mercer nodded quickly, relieved to have his fear validated by a man who treated validation as a tax. "That's what I thought. The safe is in my office at the store. It's built in, heavy. The combination is known only to me." "Combination changed?" I asked. "No," Mercer said. "Sign me numbers. Cash is all there. Nothing missing." "But it wasn't there yesterday, and it was there today." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you have had a visitor who desired you to know he had been there." Wolfe said it like it was a weather report, calm and factual, but I saw Mercer's hands. They shook the way a man's hands shake when his business stops feeling like a business and starts feeling like a trap. Wolfe leaned back. "Describe the perfume." Mercer blinked. "I'm not a perfumer." "Then do your best," Wolfe said. "I am not a department store owner." Mercer drew a breath. "It's sweet, not like flowers from a garden. Like something made to be remembered. It hits you as soon as you open the door. It's loud." "That will do," Wolfe said. "When did you notice it?" "This morning. I unlocked the safe at 9, as I always do. I keep cash for daily operations, receipts, change funds, that sort of thing. I opened it and the smell nearly knocked me back. And yesterday? Wolfe asked. At 9, it did not smell. Number. Has anyone else opened it? Mercer shook his head. Number. I'm careful. I lock my office. I keep the combination in my head. I do not write it down. Wolfe's mouth compressed. Many men believe their heads are vaults. They are mistaken. Mercer flushed, then leaned forward again. Mr. Wolfe, I know how this sounds. A smell, but it's not just a smell. It's a message. Someone has been in my office, in my safe, and they want me to know it. Wolfe considered him for a moment. When Wolfe considers, he is never hurried. He lets your anxiety bounce off him until it breaks. Do you have enemies? Wolfe asked. Mercer gave a short laugh that held no humor. Anion, who runs a store, has enemies. Competitors, suppliers. People you refuse to credit. People you fired. People who think you owe them because they want something. Are you being blackmailed? Wolfe asked. No, Mercer said, then hesitated. Not exactly. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Not exactly is a phrase used by liars and politicians. Choose. Mercer swallowed. I received a letter last week. No signature. It said I should be more attentive to what I keep locked away. It said secrets do not like darkness. Wolfe's brows rose a fraction. That was his version of interest. And you ignored it. I thought it was nonsense, Mercer admitted. A crank. We get them. People write to stores about everything, prices, morals, missing buttons. I threw it out. Wolfe looked at me. Archie. I hear you, I said. We go to Mercer's, sniff the safe, and try not to look romantic doing it. Wolfe's gaze returned to Mercer. We will visit your office. If the scent is as you claim, it may provide more than annoyance. Mercer exhaled, a breath he had been holding for days. Thank you, Wolfe added. Before we go, you will answer 2 questions. First, who else has access to your office after hours? Mercer shook his head. It's locked. There's a guard on the floor, cleaning staff. But they do not enter my office unless my secretary is present. Second, Wolfe said, do you keep anything in the safe besides cash? Mercer's eyes flicked away, and that told me the safe had more than money. Money is easy to admit. Other things are not. Wolfe's voice remained calm. Mr. Mercer's jaw tightened. I keep some documents. Old documents. Old, Wolfe repeated, unimpressed. Mercer sighed. Family papers. My father founded the store. There are letters, contracts, a few deeds, things that matter to us. And perhaps, Wolfe said, things that matter to others. Mercer did not answer. His silence answered for him. Wolfe rose, which meant the case had officially become real. It was also noon, which meant Wolfe was sacrificing comfort, and that always meant the bait was good. The winter air was sharp and clean, and the traffic noise on 6th Avenue had the steady grind of money being made and wasted. Wolfe climbed into the taxi with the air of a man entering an inferior drawing room. Mercer's store was a familiar landmark, a tall, respectable building with windows dressed in good taste and prices that pretended not to be proud. We went up to the executive floor, where the carpet was thick enough to muffle worry, and the walls were covered with framed photographs of Mercer smiling, beside mannequins that looked more alive than he did at the moment. Mercer's office was large, orderly, and bland in the way successful spaces often are. There was a desk that could have commanded an army, a couch that had never been sat on honestly, and a safe built into a cabinet wall behind a painting of a peaceful harbor. I noticed the harbor and filed it away. Harbors are never as peaceful as paintings insist. Mercer unlocked the safe. The door swung open. The smell hit us. It was not a cheap blast from a drugstore bottle. It was layered, deliberate, engineered to stay, sweet, bright, and oddly sharp underneath, like a smile that had teeth. It had soaked into the felt lining, as Mercer said, as if someone had pressed a perfumed cloth against it and waited. Wolfe did not flinch. Wolfe rarely does, but his nostrils widened slightly, and I saw that the scent had made it past his pride. I leaned in, careful not to touch anything. The cash bundles were stacked neatly, a metal box sat in the corner, a folder of papers was tucked flat under a shelf. I said softly, "It's loud, all right. It sounds like it wants applause." Wolfe's eyes moved over the interior. "A scent can be a signature," he said, "or a taunt." Mercer's voice was tight. "Can you tell what it is?" Wolfe looked at the felt lining, then at the edge of the shelf. "Not yet, but I can tell this. Whoever did it had time. They were not frightened. They were not hurried." I spotted something on the felt, barely visible against the dark fabric. A faint smear, almost like a shadow, where the fibers had been brushed the wrong way. I reached for my pocket knife, then stopped. "Wolfe hates unauthorized touching," I said. "There's a mark." Wolfe leaned closer, peering without touching. "Yes, the felt has been disturbed." Mercer swallowed. "What does that mean?" Wolfe's voice was mild, and that mildness carried weight. "It means the perfume was not the only thing placed here or removed." I looked at the folder of papers. Mercer's eyes followed mine and tightened. Wolfe said, "Mr. Mercer, open your metal box." Mercer's hand shook as he lifted the box. He opened it. It was empty. The air in the office changed. A missing thing always changes air. It makes it sharper, more accusatory. Mercer's voice cracked. "That's where I kept the documents." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, not with surprise, but with confirmation. "Now, you may tell me what documents they were." Mercer's face went pale. "A contract, old signed by my father and a shipping company. Harbor line." Wolfe looked at the painting of the peaceful harbor, then back at Mercer. "Then the safe does indeed smell like tomorrow," he said quietly. "And tomorrow will be unpleasant." I stared at Mercer. Somebody stole a shipping contract and left Perfume as a calling card. That's either romance or trouble. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. "It is trouble. Romance requires affection. This requires fear." Mercer whispered, "Who would want that contract?" Wolfe answered without lifting his voice, "Someone who believes it proves something. Someone who wishes you to know they now possess it. And someone who is confident you will not go to the police, because the contract's history is not clean." Mercer's hands trembled again, worse now. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. "Archie, we return home. Then we begin asking questions. Many questions." I nodded. The perfume clung in my nose as we left, sweet and sharp, like a promise made by a man who intended to collect. Back in the taxi, Wolfe sat silent, eyes half-lidded, already sorting possibilities into neat stacks. I watched the city slide past and thought about the felt lining, the empty box, and the choice of perfume. A thief who wants to vanish does not leave a scent that shouts. A thief who wants to be remembered does. On Riddle Street, that means somebody is not stealing. Somebody is signaling. And when the signal is expensive, it usually means the stakes are too. Chapter 2. Felt, metal, and a quiet. Lie the store looked rich, the kind of rich that hides trouble behind good lighting. Mercer's department store had window displays that could make a man forget the rent, and aisles arranged so a shopper could drift from gloves to gilt without noticing the turn. So did the staff. They smiled with training and watched with practice. Caleb Mercer led me through it, as if walking too slowly might make the scent catch up and embarrass him in public. He kept his shoulders square, his chin up, his hat tucked under his arm like a credential. If you saw him on the sales floor, you would have thought he was inspecting profits. You would not have guessed he was escorting a problem. His executive suite sat above the noise, carpeted and hushed, with framed photographs on the walls showing Mercer in handshake poses with mayors, charity chairmen, and one retired boxer who looked as if he did not like department stores. Mercer's secretary rose when we entered her outer office. She was in her 30s, hair pinned neatly, blouse crisp, expression polite enough to be weaponized. "Mr. Mercer," she said. Her eyes flicked to me. "Is this gentleman expected?" "This is Mr. Goodwin," Mercer told her. "He is assisting me." Her smile did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "Of course." The safe was in Mercer's private office, set into a cabinet wall behind a tasteful painting of a harbor that had never seen a strike or a stolen shipment in its life. The desk was large and tidy. A pen stand sat at the exact angle a man uses when he believes the world should behave. Mercer's chair behind the desk looked expensive and lonely. Mercer closed the door behind us and exhaled as if the room could not be trusted either. "There it is," he said, pointing at the cabinet. "All right," I told him. "Let us see if it bites." He moved to the safe and spun the dial. Careful, deliberate. I watched his hands. They were steady enough to open a store, but not steady enough to close a secret. He was too precise, too practiced, like a man demonstrating that he knew the combination and wanted me to notice. The dial stopped, the bolts released with a dull click. Mercer pulled the handle. The door swung open cleanly. No scrape, no hesitation. Numbers still worked fine. Door swung clean. Cash looked bored. And then the smell hit me again. It was stronger than in my memory, which meant it was stronger than it had any right to be. It had weight, it had persistence. It had that expensive arrogance that says it expects to be recognized, not a spritz. A soak. Mercer stiffened beside me, watching my face, the way a man watches a doctor's eyes. "There," he said, voice tight. "You smell it." "I smell it," I agreed. I leaned in, careful not to touch the lining yet, and let my nose do its job. The perfume was sweet, but not floral. It had a bright top note that almost fooled you into thinking it was cheerful, and then an underlying sharpness that carried something like metal and paper. A safe should smell like cold steel and old currency, maybe a touch of dust if the owner is sentimental. This one smelled like somebody had wanted to be remembered. I murmured, "That's not vanity, that's a signal." Mercer's throat bobbed. "Signal to what?" "To you," I said, "and possibly to someone else." He tried for indignation. "No one else was in my office." "That's a claim," I said, "not a fact." I peered inside. The money stacks were neat. The small metal cash box sat in the corner, lid open now, empty, like a mouth that had lost its teeth. A thin file folder lay flat under the lower shelf, and Mercer's eyes kept darting to it as if it might start talking. I held up a hand. "Before we get dramatic, I want to see the felt." Mercer nodded quickly, relieved to do something that looked like cooperation. "Please." I ran a finger along the felt lining lightly, just enough to feel the nap. It was good felt. Thick, the kind meant to protect documents and discourage rattles. My finger paused at the left wall, near the back corner. There the odor was strongest, uneven, concentrated, like somebody had pressed a paper packet there and held it patient and practiced. The felt fibers were brushed the wrong way, flattened in a rectangle. It was the shape of something that had been stored snug and then removed with care, then returned, then removed again. I said, "Here." Mercer leaned. "What?" "Strongest on the left wall," I told him. "Uneven, like somebody held a paper packet right here. Not a loose sheet, a bundle." Mercer's jaw tightened. "I told you nothing is missing." "People say nothing missing the way they say I'm fine. It means do not look where it hurts." I asked, "You ever store anything damp in here?" "No," he snapped. The answer came too fast. It had a clean edge, too clean. I looked at him. Not ever, not once, not even by accident. His eyes flashed with irritation that looked a little like fear. "Number." I leaned back into the safe and sniffed again, deeper past the perfume. Underneath was another scent, faint but real damp paper memory, not wet enough to drip, wet enough to leave a ghost on felt. The kind of damp you get when paper has been handled with a cloth or exposed to a mist and then shut away quickly. I said, "Something was in here damp, Mr. Mercer." He lifted his chin. "Number." "Then the safe is lying," I said, "and I do not think safes start lying on their own." Mercer's lips parted, then closed. He looked toward the office door, as if expecting someone to burst in and rescue him from my nose. "All right," I said, keeping my voice mild. because mild is how you get people to talk. Let's pretend you are right. Let's pretend nothing was damp. That still leaves perfume soaked into felt. A person spent time doing that. They either opened this safe with the combination, or they were so skilled they made no scratches and left no pressure marks, except that nice rectangle. Mercer's eyes went to my finger on the felt. Couldn't it be from something else? A bottle leaking, a gift. I straightened and looked at him. A gift stored inside your safe. Perhaps, he said stiffly. I asked, do you keep perfume in there? Number, does your wife? She does not come to my office, Mercer said, and the sentence sounded rehearsed. I let that hang for a moment, and then asked, who cleans in here? Mercer hesitated. The executive cleaning crew, after hours. Names, I said. He frowned. I can get them. Get them now, I said, and bring in your head of security. Mercer's mouth tightened at being told what to do in his own office. But fear is a better boss than pride. He opened the door and called his secretary. Her eyes slid to the open safe at once, then away too quickly. Yes, Mr. Mercer, she said. I need Mr. Bittner, Mercer told her. Security, and I need the cleaning roster for this floor. At once, she said, and left with that efficient glide women use when they are not being paid to glide. While we waited, I did what Archie Goodwin does when given a room with expensive problems. I looked around. The desk drawers were closed, the blotter was new, the wastebasket was empty, which meant either Mercer had recently cleaned up or someone else had. A small framed photograph of a younger Mercer and an older man stood near the lamp. The older man had a heavy face and hard eyes, the kind of man who had never trusted a sale sign. Mercer followed my gaze. My father, he said quickly. Founder, I said. Yes. Harbor Line contract connected to him, I said. Not asking, Mercer's shoulders tightened. It was old history. Old history is what people kill for when it stays profitable, I told him. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, as if he had remembered that Wolfe would not be there to take over, and I was the one he had. Mr. Bittner arrived, broad-shouldered, close-cropped hair, a face built to discourage shoplifting. He had the calm eyes of a man who has watched people pretend to be innocent for a living. Mercer introduced him. Bittner's handshake was firm, professional, and faintly skeptical. You had a security breach, I said. Bittner glanced at Mercer, then at the safe. His expression did not change, but his eyes tightened. We have no report of a breach. That's because you have no report of a perfume, I said. Who has access to this office after hours? Mr. Mercer, Bittner said, his secretary. Maintenance by appointment, cleaning crew under supervision. Who supervises cleaning? I asked. Bittner frowned. Floor manager, usually, or the night supervisor. And last night, I said. Bittner hesitated. That hesitation was interesting. Last night the night supervisor called in sick. We had a substitute. What's the substitute's name? I asked. Bittner told me. I wrote it down. Mercer's secretary returned with a roster. She placed it on the desk, careful not to look at the safe. The list had names, dates, assignments. I scanned it, looking for anything that stood out. One name did, not because it was unusual, but because it had a note beside it. Perfumery stock check. 8:40 p.m. I looked up. Perfumery stock check on the executive floor. The secretary's mouth tightened. Mr. Mercer requested it. Mercer blinked. I did no such thing. The secretary's cheeks colored slightly. Mr. Mercer, you signed the internal request yesterday afternoon. I did not, Mercer insisted. And the insistence sounded like a man fighting a fact. I watched him. A quiet lie had just walked into the room and sat down. I kept my voice friendly. Maybe your signature was borrowed. Bittner's eyes narrowed. We can verify. We will, I said. Meanwhile, I have a question. The perfume in that safe, is it sold here? Mercer's jaw tightened. We sell many perfumes. That one, I said. Sweet, sharp, expensive. made to be remembered. The secretary said softly, "We introduced a new line last week. Limited release, only for preferred customers. Call tomorrow." Mercer's head snapped toward her. "Stop." I smiled. "Tomorrow, that's poetic. It also sounds like trouble packaged in a bottle." Bittner looked at Mercer. "Sir." "Sir." Mercer's face had gone pale. "This is ridiculous." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe someone used your own store's perfume as a calling card because it would point back to you or to someone inside your circle. Either way, it means the scent is not random, it is a brand." Mercer's hands trembled again. "I told Wolfe. I told him it was a signal." "Yes," I agreed. "But you did not tell him everything." Mercer's eyes flashed. "What are you accusing me of?" "Not accusing," I said. "Listening, your safe smells like tomorrow. Your perfumery department did a stock check. Nobody requested. The felt shows a damp paper rectangle. Your metal box is empty. That means a document was here recently, handled damp, scented, removed, returned long enough to leave a message, then removed again." Mercer swallowed. "I do not know anything about damp." I leaned closer. "Mr. Mercer, if you want Wolfe to protect you, you will stop protecting yourself. Tell me what was in that metal box." He stared at the empty box, and for a moment the executive pose slipped. A man showed through, one who had made a decision years ago and was now paying interest. "It was a contract," he said quietly. "Shipping signed by my father. It granted exclusive handling rights through a pier that no longer exists under that name." "Harbor Line," I said. He nodded. I asked, "Why was it in your safe?" "Because it could be used," he admitted. "Not by me, not now, but it could be used against me. That's the trap feeling." Bittner shifted. "Mr. Mercer, why wasn't security informed?" Mercer's face hardened again. "Because security reports get filed. Filed things get found." I turned to Bittner. "Get me the sign-in log for the perfumery stock check. Get me the name of the substitute night supervisor. And get me the signature verification on that request." Bittner nodded, already moving. I looked at Mercer. "One more thing. Who has reason to signal you with your own perfume?" Mercer's mouth tightened. "Someone who wants me to panic, or someone who wants you to remember," I said. He stared at the safe. "Remember what?" I did not answer. I did not have to. The safe was already answering, loud as a confession, and the only question left was who had written the message and who would collect when Mercer read it. On the way out, the secretary walked me to the door. Her voice was soft. "Mr. Goodwin," I paused. She met my eyes. "Mr. Mercer is not a bad man." I smiled faintly. "I'm not hired to grade his soul. I'm hired to keep it from being repossessed." As I stepped into the elevator, the scent still clung in my nose. Tomorrow. A name for a perfume and a threat. A signal delivered in felt and metal, with damp paper memory underneath like a second voice. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe would be waiting, calm, proud, methodical, ready to turn a smell into a motive. And somewhere in the city, the person who had perfumed a safe was counting on the fact that people underestimate what a scent can remember. Chapter 3. The Atomizer Display. In my line of work, stores close early and trouble stays late. Mercer's department store shut its doors with velvet rope politeness at 6. But by 9 the building had a different posture. The bright cheer of commerce went out, and what remained was the skeleton of it. Aisles, counters, mirrors, mannequins, and the faint stale perfume of 1,000 customers who had tried on other people's confidence. 2 days had passed since I had stood in Caleb Mercer's executive office and sniffed his safe like a bloodhound with a rent bill. Wolfe had done what he always does when given a fact that offends him. He sat in his chair and made it multiply. Saul Panzer had been put on a leash of instructions. Ori Cather had been asked questions he did not enjoy. I had made a second trip to the store, this time to watch people instead of felt. Caleb Mercer was supposed to come to Wolfe's office the next morning, with the letter he had thrown out, the list of cleaning staff, and the name of the substitute night supervisor. He never arrived at 8:47 that night. Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins called me at the brownstone. His voice was careful, like a man carrying a tray of fragile bad news. "Archie," he said, "you better get down to Mercer's." "What for?" I asked, already knowing Stebbins hesitated. "Mr. Mercer's been hurt. Bad." "Hurt like hospital," I said. "Hurt like morgue," Stebbins replied. I grabbed my coat and went out into the cold. The city's night air had that sharp bite that makes you feel awake even when you would rather not be. The taxi ride was quick, too quick for comfort, and when I pulled up in front of Mercer's, the sidewalk was already crowded with the usual New York chorus: curious faces, uniformed cops, and men with notebooks, pretending they were not thrilled. Inside, the main floor was lit harshly, the overhead lights making everything look like a stage set, and the stage had a centerpiece, a perfume display. Crystal atomizers glittered like tiny chandeliers fallen to earth. They were arranged in rows on velvet pads, each one a little bulb of cut glass with a silver nozzle, as pretty and harmless as a lie told with a smile. Caleb Mercer was face down among them. His suit jacket was spread like a dark spill against the bright display, and the shattered glass around his head caught the light in sharp, clean edges. His arm was bent at an awkward angle, hand curled as if he had tried to grab something and missed. Stebbins stood nearby with 2 uniforms. He looked at me with that tired expression he wears when trouble repeats itself and insists it is new. "Looks like he tripped," Stebbins said. "Head went down, bad luck." I crouched, careful not to step where the photographers were already claiming territory. "Bad luck usually doesn't leave bruises on the wrist," I said. Stebbins blinked. "What?" I pointed. Mercer's right wrist had a faint dark mark, the beginning of a bruise, the kind that comes from fingers clamped too hard. His hand was angled oddly, not limp the way a dead hand usually is, but twisted, as if it had been forced open. Stebbins frowned. "Could be from the fall." "Maybe," I said, "or from someone making sure he fell." I looked at the atomizers. Most were intact. One was smashed in a different way. The glass fractured in a spray pattern that looked like impact from the side, not downward. If a man simply tripped and collapsed, the break would be clustered where his weight landed. This break had a sideways scatter, like a struggle had happened, and someone's heel or elbow had kicked the display before the final drop. I straightened and sniffed, because sometimes your nose is smarter than your eyes. There it was again, faint but unmistakable, sweet and sharp, threaded through the air like a new thought. Tomorrow, fresh. Stebbins saw my face. "You smelling something?" "Yeah," I said, trouble with a price tag. Footsteps approached, heavy and measured. Wolfe's voice had brought him out of his chair, which meant the case had become an insult. He entered the scene with his overcoat draped properly, hat set like a statement, eyes scanning the floor, the way he reads a menu he does not trust. He stopped short of the body, did not kneel, did not touch, simply looked, then he inhaled. "The same fragrance," Wolfe said softly. Stebbins snorted. "Perfume in a perfume display. That's not exactly a revelation." Wolfe's gaze shifted to him with cold patience. "Not the presence, Sergeant, the freshness. It is recent, and it is not widely sprayed here." Stebbins opened his mouth, then shut it. "When Wolfe talks quietly, it is because he expects the room to listen," I said. "The safe smelled like it. Now the glass smells like it. Somebody's using a department store as stationery." Wolfe's eyes moved over the shattered atomizers, the velvet pads, the droplets of liquid that had pooled in tiny shining beads. "This is not an accident," he said. Stebbins frowned. "We got no sign of robbery. He's got his wallet. His watch. Nobody broke in." Wolfe's voice remained calm. "The motive is not theft. It is communication." I glanced at Mercer's face, what I could see of it. His cheek was pressed into velvet and glass. His mouth was slightly open, not in surprise, but in the slackness of a man whose last breath was taken for him. The scent was strongest near his collar and hairline, as if someone had sprayed him close, not from a distance. I pointed again at the wrist. Somebody held him. Stebbins said, "You got witnesses." "One." a uniform said, stepping forward. Night clerk in cosmetics, heard a scuffle, came around, saw Mercer go down, saw someone run. Describe, Stebbins demanded. The clerk swallowed. A man, dark coat, hat. He moved fast. I didn't see his face. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Did you smell perfume on him? The clerk stared confused. I smell perfume all day. Wolfe's mouth tightened. That is the difficulty with an obvious weapon. It hides in plain sight. Stebbins looked at Wolfe. You got anything else? Wolfe did not answer at once. He was watching the shattered atomizer, the one broken sideways. He was watching the pattern, the way he watches a liar's hands. Then he said, Mr. Mercer was not killed for the cash in his safe. He was killed because he knew something was missing, and because he was going to speak. Stebbins's face hardened. Speak to who? Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. To us, he said. I felt the cold settle deeper. He was supposed to come tomorrow morning. Yes, Wolfe said. Stebbins muttered. So someone stopped him. Wolfe's gaze drifted to the display. And they stopped him here, among the atomizers, because it provides a story. He tripped. Bad luck. An accident made plausible by glass and commerce. I said, but the perfume makes it personal. Wolfe nodded slightly. It makes it timed. A signal left when the act was done, or left to ensure we associate the act with the safe. Stebbins rubbed his chin. You telling me the killer is spraying perfume as a signature? Wolfe's voice went colder. I am telling you the killer wants us to think that. A signature is vanity. This is strategy. A photographer's flash popped. Bright and rude, Wolfe did not flinch. He watched the light reflect off glass shards and then fade. Archie, Wolfe said, find the broken atomizer's label. I did. The velvet pad beneath it had a small tag, tomorrow. Limited release, preferred customers. I held it up. Same name. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then the perfume is not merely present. It is chosen, Stebbins said. Chosen by who? Wolfe did not answer him. Wolfe rarely answers a question that is asked too soon. He looked at Mercer's body one more time, then at the velvet pads, then at the clerk. You heard a scuffle, Wolfe said. How long? The clerk blinked. Maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds, Wolfe repeated. Enough time for restraint and a push. Not enough for a long argument. Mr. Mercer was surprised. Stebbins asked, So what now? Wolfe's gaze lifted, and it was sharp enough to cut through the perfume haze. Now, he said, we return to my house. And you, Sergeant, will tell Inspector Kramer that I require the list of preferred customers for the tomorrow release. And I require it tonight. Stebbins bristled. You require. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. Yes, Mr. Mercer is dead because he was going to disclose something. Whoever killed him believes time is short. Therefore our time is shorter. I looked at Mercer one last time. Department store owner, safe perfumed. Contract missing. Now face down in crystal and velvet like a display, too costly to disturb. The accident story was quick and clean, like a clerk smoothing a wrinkled countercloth. But the broken atomizer and the bruised wrist told a different story, and the fresh perfume told the most important part. It wasn't decoration, it was timing. Chapter 4. The bottle that fits a handbag by the time we got back to the brownstone. The perfume had followed me like a bad idea. It clung to the inside of my nose, sweet and sharp, expensive enough to be insulting. New York has 1,000 smells that can ruin your appetite. But this one was determined to ruin your sleep. Wolfe did not comment on my mood. Wolfe rarely comments on my mood unless it inconveniences him. He removed his overcoat with the slow care of a man peeling off the world, handed it to Fritz without looking, and marched himself straight to the office as if the murder scene had been an imposition on his schedule that must now be corrected. Fritz appeared in the doorway a minute later, expression firm, hands cleaned, dignity intact. Dinner is in 20 minutes, he announced. Wolfe nodded. Yes. Fritz's eyes went to me. And you will wash your hands. I will, I said. I have been handling tragedy and glass. Fritz did not soften. Tragedy does not excuse dirt. He vanished, as satisfied as a man can be in a house where murder keeps ringing the bell. I set my notebook on my desk and looked at Wolfe. Stebbins said Kramer will get you the preferred customer list. Stebbins will attempt, Wolfe replied. Inspector Kramer will comply when he realizes that refusing will prolong his work. You always talk about the police, like they are weather, I said. They behave similarly, Wolfe said, unpredictable, loud, and often damp. He reached into a drawer and removed a sealed evidence envelope. Inside, neatly folded, was a piece of felt lining from Mercer's safe. I had persuaded Bittner, Mercer's security chief, to let me cut a section before the police sealed the office, and Bittner had agreed because he was a sensible man with a nervous employer. Now the employer was dead, and the felt had become a witness. Wolfe took the felt out with his fingertips as if it might smear its testimony. He held it under the desk lamp and examined it the way he examined everything, as if it were guilty until proven precise. He sniffed once. Not a deep inhale, not a performance, just a small controlled breath, like a judge tasting poison. To confirm it is poison, then he said, uneven absorption. I leaned forward. That means what? Wolfe rotated the felt slightly. The fragrance entered in pressure bands. Something was held against it, a folder perhaps, an envelope. You can see pressure bands in felt, I said. That's either genius or witchcraft. Neither, Wolfe replied. It is attention. He set the felt on the blotter and pointed with a thick finger. Under the lamp, the felt showed subtle differences, faint darkening where the perfume had soaked deeper. The pattern was not uniform. It was rectangular, but the edges were irregular, as if the object pressed against it had been handled and shifted slightly. Wolfe continued, voice calm, exact. Mr. Mercer's safe was perfumed. The perfume was concentrated on one side, strongest where an object was pressed and held. The felt fibers were flattened. That indicates both time and intention, I said. So we're looking for a paper bandit? No, Wolfe corrected. We are looking for a paper borrower, a borrower who kills, I said. Possibly, Wolfe replied. But the act in the safe came first. He lifted the felt again and held it closer to the light. A document was removed, examined, duplicated, then replaced. I stared, replaced, but the metal box was empty. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. When you and I saw the safe, the box was empty. That does not establish it was empty when the perfume was applied. I felt that settle. A simple point, and it made the timeline rearrange itself. You think the thief took the contract, did whatever they needed, put it back, then took it again, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied, or compelled someone else to take it. I sat back. That's a lot of risk for paper. Wolfe's mouth tightened. It is not paper, it is leverage, I said, and Mercer was going to bring it to you. Wolfe did not answer directly. He set the felt down and reached for a small glass jar with a lid, the sort of thing he used for samples when he wished to dignify them. He placed the felt inside, sealed it, and held it for a moment as if listening through the glass. Then he set it down and said, the perfume was transferred from a small bottle. I blinked. How do you get size from smell? Wolfe's gaze made a small, impatient circle. Not from smell, from method. A large bottle is awkward. It invites spills and attention. A small bottle is precise, handbag-sized. Concealable, a person could carry it into Mercer's office under the pretext of business or cleaning, apply it to the document or to a cloth, press the document to the felt, and leave with no visible trace except the scent. So the murderer had a handbag, I said. Wolfe stared at me. Or a pocket, or a case. Do not be literal. Fine, I said. A container that fits a hand. Wolfe nodded, satisfied I had crawled toward competence. The document was wet with perfume. That is why you detected damp paper memory. The scent was loud because it had not dried. I rubbed my chin. Mercer noticed it in the morning. The request for the perfumery stock check was signed the afternoon before. Wolfe's eyelids lowered slightly. The request was forged. The purpose was to create a legitimate reason for someone to handle the perfume after hours on the executive floor. To get tomorrow out of the case without questions, I said. Yes, Wolfe said. And to establish a time window. I frowned. Why mark time? Wolfe leaned back in his chair, and I could tell he was about to enjoy himself. Wolfe enjoys problems when they behave. Because scent changes, Wolfe said. A scented document dries. Its intensity diminishes and alters. One may estimate when it was handled. I made a face. That is exact. It is also creepy. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. Smell is the least modest witness and often the most exact. I said, if the perfume is a timestamp, it means the borrower wanted Mercer to know when the swap happened, or wanted someone else to know Mercer knew. Wolfe replied. That was the sort of sentence Wolfe tosses out like a casual remark, and then you spend the next hour wishing you had not heard it. So the scent wasn't to seduce, I said. It was to provoke. To provoke fear, Wolfe agreed. Fear produces mistakes. Mr. Mercer was frightened. He contacted me. That accelerated events. Therefore he was killed. Because he was going to talk, I said. Wolfe's eyes held mine. Because he was going to identify the missing document and perhaps identify the person who had access. I leaned forward again. What about the atomizer display? Same perfume. Fresh on the shards. That sounds like a signature. It is meant to sound like a signature, Wolfe said. A signature invites the hunter to chase the wrong animal. Meaning, I said, the killer is using tomorrow like a mask. I stared at the jar with the felt inside. Who has access to tomorrow? Wolfe's mouth tightened. Preferred customers, store executives, perfumery staff. Anyone who can forge a request and walk through the building at night without being challenged. Or someone who can make security look away, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes. The door opened and Fritz entered with a tray because Fritz refuses to let murder interfere with dinner. The smell of roast and browned butter walked in ahead of him like a peace treaty. He set the tray down on the side table with precise care. Mr. Wolfe, he said, you must eat. Wolfe glanced at the clock and nodded. Yes. Fritz's eyes moved to the jar and the felt. That is from the safe. Yes, Wolfe said. Fritz sniffed once unintentionally, and his mouth tightened. That smell does not belong in this house. It does not belong anywhere, I told him. Fritz looked at me as if I had insulted his kitchen. It belongs in a bottle, not in felt, not on a corpse. He left. Wolfe ate with measured calm, as if roast could restore order to a city that kept rearranging itself into crimes. I ate, because Fritz's cooking deserves respect, and because I had stood near too much broken glass to pretend I was not hungry. Between bites, Wolfe spoke, because Wolfe cannot resist organizing facts when his mind is warm. The sequence is this, he said. A person gained access to Mercer's office after hours under a plausible pretext. They removed a contract. They applied perfume in a controlled manner, likely using a small bottle. They pressed the perfume document against the safe lining, creating a pattern of pressure bands and leaving a strong scent. They returned the document to its container. They left, satisfied that Mercer would notice in the morning. To push him, I said. To push him, Wolfe agreed. He noticed. He panicked. He contacted me. That indicated he intended to act. The thief then removed the document again, perhaps because Mercer's contact with me made delay dangerous. And when Mercer was still going to talk, I said, they killed him in the perfume department to make it look like a slip. Yes, Wolfe replied. The setting provided a convenient narrative and an opportunity to apply fresh scent, ensuring the connection remained obvious. I swallowed a mouthful and said, so the perfume is not the motive. It is a tool. Exactly, Wolfe said, like a key that does not open a lock but opens a mind. I set my fork down. Wolfe, what does the contract prove? Why borrow it instead of steal it outright? Wolfe's eyes went distant for a moment, toward the plant rooms upstairs, toward the orchids that never lied unless neglected. Because, he said, the borrower desired something from it, not possession, but information. A date, a clause, a signature, a chain of rights, something that must be copied precisely. Photographed, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Or duplicated by other means. Then the contract could now exist in 2 places, I said, one in the thief's hands, one still missing from Mercer. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Or more. We finished dinner. Fritz cleared the tray. The house settled into its late evening quiet, the kind that makes you hear the radiator click and the city murmur beyond the windows. Wolfe returned to his chair with a cigar, and the jar felt on his desk like a captured animal. The phone rang, he answered, because that is my role in the household hierarchy. The voice was Stebbins, sounding pleased with himself, which always means he has found something and wants credit. Archie, he said, got that list Wolfe wanted. The preferred customers, I said. Yeah, Stebbins replied. Limited release tomorrow. Only a couple dozen names, big spenders, society types, and one other category. What category? I asked. Staff, he said. Executive staff who get product for promotion, and a private event 2 nights ago, invite only, held in Mercer's executive suite. I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes were on me, alert now, cigar forgotten. I asked Stebbins, private event, who attended? Stebbins hesitated. Got the sign-in sheet. It's messy, some names, some initials, but there's a coordinator listed. Name, I said. He gave it. I repeated it to Wolfe as I wrote it down. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw the line of thought form. Coordinators have access. Coordinators carry handbags. Coordinators move through a store at night and call it work. When I hung up, Wolfe spoke quietly. Now we have a door. A door to who? I asked. Wolfe tapped the jar with one finger. To the person who handled tomorrow, not as merchandise, but as a clock. I rubbed my nose, still haunted by that sweet sharpness. So we follow the time stamp back to the hand. Yes, Wolfe said, and the hand will lead us to the missing contract. And the killer, I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Perhaps the same, perhaps not, but we will proceed as if the person who borrows paper is capable of borrowing a life. He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. Archie, tomorrow morning you will visit Mercer's again. You will speak to the coordinator. You will speak to the substitute night supervisor. You will also obtain a bottle of tomorrow. I blinked. You want me to buy perfume. I want you to acquire it, Wolfe corrected. There is a difference. Fritz will love that, I said. Wolfe's eyes hardened slightly. Fritz will survive. I stood, reached for my coat, and felt the case tighten around us the way it always does when Wolfe finds the thread worth pulling. A safe had been perfumed to mark time. A man had been killed among atomizers to underline the message. Somewhere, a document had been borrowed long enough to be copied, and the copy was now walking the city in someone's pocket, like a hidden bill, on Riddle Street. That is how tomorrow begins. Not with sunshine, but with a scent that refuses to fade. Chapter 5. The people who had keys without having keys are safe is like a confession booth. You do not get inside without being invited, or knowing the priest, or discovering the priest has a habit of whispering his sins where the choir can hear. Mercer's department store looked the same in daylight as it always did. Rich and confident, with sunlight on its windows and customers drifting through the aisles like money with feet. But the second-floor executive suite felt different now. A death does that. It makes every polished surface look like it is waiting to be questioned. I showed my face at the security desk, produced my name, and was escorted with just enough courtesy to remind me that I was not welcome, but I was tolerated. The escort this time was Dane Cross, the security chief, a man with square shoulders and a jaw that looked built to deny requests. Cross led me past the office Mercer had used and the cabinet wall where the safe sat hidden behind the harbor painting. The painting had been removed for police work. The safe door was shut. The room smelled faintly of cleaning products and caution. "You're here again," Cross said. "I like the lighting." I told him. It makes everyone look innocent. Cross did not smile. What do you want? I want the truth, I said, but I'll settle for an honest lie. He stared, then jerked his head toward a back office where chairs were arranged the way management arranges people to control them. Fine, you can talk to them, one at a time. He brought them in like a lineup that wanted to pretend it was a staff meeting. First was Harold Pike, the store manager. He was polished, impatient, and dressed as if the store itself were a suit he wore. His eyes had that executive irritation that says he thinks time is his property. He sat, crossed his legs, and glanced at his watch in a manner meant to establish hierarchy. "You're Goodwin," he said, "Wolfe's man." "I'm the legs," I replied. "He's the appetite." Pike did not appreciate that. "If this is about procedures, we have procedures." "This is about a dead man," I said. "Procedures are what people hide behind when they cannot afford to answer." He drew in a breath, controlled ask. "Who could access Mercer's office after hours?" I said. Pike shrugged. "Management, security, cleaning, supervised." "Names," I said. Pike's mouth tightened. "Too many. You want a list? Talk to Cross." "I will," I said. "Now tell me who had reason to be in there when Mercer wasn't." His eyes narrowed. "Reason. There's always reason. A report, an inventory check, a problem with payroll. Mercer kept things close. He liked surprises. He also disliked being disturbed." "That sounds like a man easy to watch," I said. Pike's expression flickered. "Watch." "The safe combination never changed," I said. "That means the intruder likely watched Mercer enter it, or got it indirectly. You ever stand in his office while he dialed it?" Pike scoffed. "Number only Mercer opened it." "That was not my question," I said. He stared at me, and I could see him measuring how much truth was safe to admit. "Sometimes," he said at last. "He would open it with me present if we were reviewing cash reserves." "How often?" "Monthly," Pike said. "Sometimes more if there were shortages." "Any shortages lately?" I asked. Pike's eyes hardened. "Not that I know." That was a careful answer. "Not that I know" is the cousin of "not exactly." Next came Nero Wolfe, the in-house accountant. She was in her early 30s, calm eyes, quick math, hair pulled back, clothing plain enough to avoid attention. A woman who lives in ledgers learns not to announce herself. She sat with her hands folded and waited for my question like she already knew it. "Nero Wolfe," I said, "you handle the numbers." "I handle the records," she corrected gently. "Numbers take care of themselves." "Who knew the combination?" I asked. She did not blink. "Only Mr. Mercer. That's what he claimed." "That's what he claimed," I repeated. Her mouth tightened slightly. "Mr. Mercer enjoyed being the only gate. It made him feel secure." "That's a lie," I said. "Security is everyone's department. When a man ends up face down in glass." Voss met my eyes. "Then you already know the answer." He was not. I nodded. "Tell me about the perfumery stock check request." Her eyes flicked small and quick. That was unusual. It was routed through accounting for approval. I noticed because it was dated oddly. It was filed late, but it referenced a planned executive event. "A planned executive event," I said, "2 nights before Mercer died." "Yes," she said. "Who planned it?" I asked. Voss hesitated. "That would be handled by Mr. Mercer's aide." "Name?" "Tessa Lane," she said. Cross brought Tessa Lane in next, and the air changed. She was late 20s, efficient, guarded, dressed in a simple suit that looked expensive only because it fit perfectly. Her eyes were sharp, but they did not wander. They fixed and held, the way a person looks when they are used to being the one who remembers everything. She sat and waited. She did not offer her hand. That was fine. My hands had been in enough trouble. "Tessa Lane," I said. "Private aide, right hand, assistant," she corrected. "Right hand assistant," I said. "Who knew the combination?" She shook her head immediately. Only Mr. Mercer. He didn't trust anyone, I said. Her jaw tightened. Numbered. Did you ever see him enter it? Numbered. Did you ever stand in the room while he entered it? Her eyes stayed steady, but her voice thinned. Sometimes, if he asked for a document. A document like a shipping contract, I said. Her mouth tightened again. He had many documents. Did you ever handle the metal box? I asked. Numbered. Did you ever handle Perfume? I asked. Now her eyes blinked once. A small pause that meant the word had landed. The perfumery department is not my responsibility. But you coordinated the executive event, I said. She hesitated. Yes, and the preferred customers were invited, I said. Yes, she said more quietly. And tomorrow was showcased, I said. A limited release, a perfume that is loud enough to be a signal. Her gaze stayed on me, guarded. It is a fragrance, it is a witness, I said. Not shy, not sloppy, and never forgetful. Where were you the night of the stock check? I was here, she said. Late, preparing. With whom? I asked. She drew in a breath. With Harold Pike, with Mr. Cross, with the perfumery manager. Name. She gave it. Cross came last, though he had been hovering in the doorway the whole time like a man guarding his own answers. He sat with his shoulders squared and his voice already prepared. Who knew the combination? I asked. That's policy, Cross said. Only Mercer. That's not an answer, I said. It's the answer, Cross replied. We had no record of anyone else. We're caught, I said. But you had a substitute supervisor the night the forged request went through. Cross's eyes narrowed. We did. He's being questioned. By the police, I said. Yes. Did you ever see Mercer dial the safe? I asked. Cross's jaw tightened. I've been in the room occasionally. Occasionally is enough, I said. You don't need the combination written down if you can watch a man spin the dial once a month. Cross's eyes stayed hard. Are you accusing me? I'm listening, I said. Accusing comes later, when Wolfe is bored enough to enjoy it. I stood and looked at the four of them in my mind like pieces on Wolfe's board. Harold Pike, polished and impatient, with access and motive, if the contract threatened the store's reputation or his own career. Dane, Cross, square answers, and the power to make security look away, or to decide which breaches became records. Mira Voss, calm eyes and quick math, who could spot a forged request and could also be pressured into staying quiet. Tessa Lane, efficient and guarded, who organized the event that brought tomorrow into the executive suite and who stood close enough to Mercer's habits to learn what he thought was private. 4 answers. Same tune, different pitch. That's how you know somebody's singing from a rehearsed sheet. As Cross walked me back toward the elevators, I said, no forced entry, no scratches, no disturbed money. Somebody belonged here. Not all the same way, I said. He did not reply. Outside, the store hummed with daytime business, shoppers drifting past display cases that still glittered even though a man had died among them. The world keeps selling, even when it has blood on the floor. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe would take my notes and turn them into a structure, because that is what he does. He would ask the question that makes the rehearsed tune crack. He would use tomorrow as a clock and felt as a fingerprint. And then we would find the person who had keys without having keys. Because someone did not break in, they belonged there. Chapter 6. A letter that wasn't there if there is anything more irritating than a threat. It is a threat that disappears before you can show it to someone who knows how to spell trouble. Wolfe dislikes vanishing evidence the way Fritz dislikes fingerprints on crystal. Both of them take it personally. It was evening in the brownstone, the hour when Fritz believes the world must behave because dinner is served whether the world deserves it or not. The dining room had that steady, civilized glow that makes even a city like New York seem briefly redeemable. The table was set with exactness. The roast smelled like a moral argument. Wolfe sat at his place with the calm authority of a man who considers appetite a virtue and interruptions a misdemeanor. I came in with my notebook, and the kind of mood that makes you chew your thoughts instead of your food. Wolfe looked at me, then at the chair opposite, and spoke with his mouth full in a way that somehow remained dignified. "Report." "Happy to," I said, sitting down. The store manager, security chief, accountant, and private aide all sang the same song, just in different keys. Fritz placed a dish in front of me with a look that said, "Singing is fine, but not at the table." Then he withdrew, not far, because Fritz listens the way a good cook watches a sauce. He does not meddle, but he will not allow disaster if it can be prevented. I slid my notes across to Wolfe. He ignored the roast long enough to read them. He did not read quickly. Wolfe reads as if each line should justify its existence. When he reached the portion about the executive event, the forged request, and the limited release of tomorrow, his eyelids lowered slightly. He said. That noise meant I had fed him something he could use. I said, "There's more. Mercer got an unsigned letter last week. Threatened exposure, unless he paid quietly." Wolfe's eyes lifted. "He told you that?" "He told me in his office," I said. "Then he told me he threw it out. That may have been true at the time, or may have been a lie he hoped would keep it from becoming real." Wolfe returned to the notes. "How do you now know of this letter?" "Tessa Lane," I said. "His aide. She says Mercer mentioned it to her. He said he locked it up. After his death she couldn't find it." Fritz made a small sound in the doorway. Not a comment, just a disapproval of missing things. Then he continued his work with knives and dignity. Wolfe set down his fork. "Locked it up where?" "In the safe," I said. "At least that's what he told her." Wolfe's gaze drifted, as it often did when he was putting a sequence together. It moved past the dining room and up the stairs, not literally but mentally, to the plant rooms, where order always existed and evidence did not evaporate. The orchids were likely in bloom. Wolfe had spent his morning hour among them as usual, because even a murder does not alter his schedule. That schedule is the backbone of the house. "Then," Wolfe said, "the letter is the document." I frowned. "The document, you mean? It's what was pressed against the felt." "Yes," Wolfe replied. "It is the simplest and most probable answer. A contract may be valuable, but it is not the only paper capable of damaging a man. A letter threatening exposure is a lever. A man who is frightened will preserve such a lever." I said, "Mercer told me the contract was missing from the metal box." Wolfe nodded once. "The contract was missing when you observed it. That does not establish. It was missing when the perfume was applied, but it is not necessary. The letter is more useful to a blackmailer than an old contract, unless the contract is merely the foundation." I stared at my plate, appetite drifting away. So the borrower didn't just want the letter. They wanted to replace it. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Exactly. A man who fears scandal will check that letter often. He will read it repeatedly, not for pleasure, but to measure his danger. Therefore the borrower needed it present until the moment it became inconvenient." "Returned," I said. Wolfe nodded. "Returned, but replaced." That landed with the uncomfortable weight of logic. It made my earlier nose work in the safe feel less like a trick and more like a clock. I said, "Why replace it? If they stole it, Mercer would know immediately." "And he would act," Wolfe replied. "He might go to the police. He might go to his lawyer. He might bring it to me. He did bring it to me, at least in conversation, but he did not produce it. He claimed he threw it away," I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "A convenient claim, perhaps true, perhaps not. A frightened man will say anything to avoid admitting he has kept a threat like a pet." I pushed my plate slightly aside and leaned forward. "So, here's the picture. Someone writes Mercer a threat letter, then removes it from the safe, duplicates it, returns a copy, and keeps the original." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. "Or removes it, alters it, and returns a substitute." "A substitute," I repeated. "Meaning the replacement letter is an imitation?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and imitations are dangerous, because a man may notice imperfections." I said, "So the killer needed Mercer dead, not for money, but to stop him from recognizing the fake." Wolfe made a small, satisfied sound, the kind he makes when I climb a rung without slipping, not only to stop him from recognizing it, to stop him from showing it to someone capable of judging it, such as a competent attorney or an investigator. Or his accountant, I said. Wolfe's eyes flicked. Miss Voss, or his aide, I added. Tessa Lane, Wolfe said. And the name came out cool and exact, as if he were placing it on a shelf. Fritz returned to refill Wolfe's coffee and to retrieve my abandoned enthusiasm for dinner by force. He did not comment on the names. Fritz has heard many names in this house and knows most of them lead to unpleasantness. He prefers to keep his opinions edible. When he left, Wolfe reached for his napkin and dabbed his lips with care. Then he spoke the next part as if he were discussing the weather, which is his way of making a murder plot feel like geometry. The Perfume's drying curve, Wolfe said. I stared. You really are going to use smell as a clock? Smell is a physical phenomenon, Wolfe replied. It obeys rules. Humans often do not, but scent does. I said, all right, explain it so I can pretend it's normal. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A document saturated with perfume will lose intensity over time. The rate depends on absorption, temperature, air, and the nature of the compound. But the presence of damp paper memory in the safe, combined with Mercer's report that the scent appeared overnight and was loud in the morning, establishes a narrow window. You think it happened the night of the forged stock check, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. The forged request created a plausible reason for someone to handle tomorrow after hours on the executive floor. That person perfumed the document, pressed it into the safe lining to leave a deliberate message, returned it to its container while it was still wet, and departed. And Mercer opened the safe at 9, I said. The smell hit him fresh. Wolfe nodded. If the act had occurred earlier, the intensity would have diminished. If later, there would have been greater dampness and perhaps visible residue. You described a strong odor and subtle dampness. That is consistent with a timestamp applied several hours prior, not days. I sat back. So the perfume wasn't just to scare him. It was to prove the letter had been handled recently. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. It was to prove access, it said. I have been here, and I can be here again. But it also said, this happened at a specific time. The person who wrote or orchestrated this wanted the time known. I frowned. Why would anyone want the time known? Wolfe looked at me as if the answer was sitting on the table between the salt and the pepper. Because time establishes alibis, Archie, and it destroys them. I felt the pieces shift again. The perfume was not only a signature, it was a schedule, I said. So if we can prove when the swap happened, we can compare it to who was in the building. Yes, Wolfe replied. And we have a list, but preferred customers at the tomorrow event, I said. And staff who handled product, Wolfe added. And the substitute night supervisor, and the coordinator, I said. Tessa Lane. Wolfe's eyes stayed on mine. Perhaps. I ran a hand through my hair. We still don't have the letter. The aide says she can't find it. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Of course she cannot find it. The replacement letter may have been removed again after Mercer's death, or it may still exist under her control. In either case, it is a pivot. A pivot, I said. Like a hinge that decides which way the door swings. Exactly, Wolfe replied. If we find the replacement letter, we can test it. If it is an imitation, the handwriting will not match. The paper may be wrong. The ink may be wrong. The phrasing may be wrong. A blackmailer may mimic a style, but he will reveal himself in his habits. I said, and if Mercer was about to compare it to something? Wolfe lifted a finger. Yes, if Mercer kept any earlier notes, any drafts, any envelopes, a fearful man keeps relics. I glanced toward the hall, as if the answer might be hanging on the coat rack. So tomorrow I go back to the store and press Lane, Cross, Pike, and Voss. Wolfe nodded. You will do more than press. You will observe. The person who replaced the letter is not merely a thief. They are someone comfortable in Mercer's orbit. Someone who can move unseen because they belong. That's our theme, I said. Keys without having keys. Wolfe's mouth curved faintly, not a smile, but an acknowledgement that I had managed to keep up. Yes. I leaned forward again. But why kill Mercer in the atomizer display? Why not in his office? Wolfe's eyes went distant for a moment. Because the atomizer display offered control. The scent could be applied fresh at the scene, reinforcing the connection and implying a signature. It also provided an easy narrative for the police. An accident, a slip, a sudden collapse. The killer wanted the story to be quick and clean. And the broken atomizer pattern says struggle, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Therefore the killer accepted risk that suggests urgency, and urgency suggests Mercer was about to do something the killer could not permit. Like bring the letter to Wolfe, I said. Or to Inspector Kramer, Wolfe corrected. Or to anyone who would look closely. I sat back, letting the logic build its own staircase. Wolfe was right. It held. Then I thought of something unpleasant. Wolfe, if the letter was replaced, it means Mercer was reading a fake threat. Yes, Wolfe said. And the real threat letter is out there, I said, with someone who wants to control it. Yes, Wolfe repeated. And Mercer's death stops him from recognizing the fake, I said. But it also stops him from paying. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Unless payment was not the purpose. Unless the purpose was to force Mercer into a particular action. What action? I asked. Wolfe's voice went softer, which is when it gets dangerous, to reveal the location of another document, the contract, or a ledger, or a name. A man under fear will reach for what he believes will protect him. The killer wanted to see what Mercer would reach for. I felt a cold line run through the warm dining room, so the perfume-safe stunt was bait. Yes, Wolfe said, and Mercer took it. Fritz entered, cleared plates, and regarded Wolfe with silent warning, as if reminding him that digestion is also a schedule. Wolfe ignored the warning because Wolfe ignores everything that is not essential, and to Wolfe being right is essential. When Fritz left, Wolfe stood, a rare gesture in the dining room after dinner. He looked larger there, not physically, but in presence. He turned slightly toward the stairs that led to the plant rooms. Tomorrow morning, Wolfe said, I will spend my hour with the orchids. Then I will begin this matter properly. Properly, I said. Meaning you sit in your chair and make people come confess. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Meaning, I will arrange a confrontation. But first, Archie, we require the letter. How? I asked. Wolfe's voice was calm, by making its absence intolerable. A borrower is cautious, a forger is proud. Pride will draw them out. I stood too, and if the letter never existed. Wolfe's gaze hardened. It existed. Mercer's fear was genuine, and fear does not bloom from nothing. He moved toward the office, and I followed. Because that is my job, and because my week had already caught fire. In the office, Wolfe sat again, the red leather receiving him like a throne. He looked down at my notes once more. Archie, he said, tomorrow you will obtain a bottle of tomorrow. You will also obtain any remaining correspondence of Mr. Mercer that his aide will surrender. You will do so politely. If politeness fails, you will improvise. I always do, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Do it without creating a second corpse. No promises, I said, then corrected myself when his stare sharpened. Fine, I'll try. As I went upstairs to sleep, the house felt steady again, as if Fritz's dinner had patched the world temporarily, but in my head I could still smell that sweet, sharp arrogance tomorrow. Letter that was not there. A safe lined with felt that remembered pressure bands like fingerprints, a dead man among crystal atomizers, and a killer who did not want money so much as control over what a man could recognize. On Riddle Street, the quickest way to get killed is to start noticing the difference between a real threat and an imitation. Chapter 7. The scent map. Wolfe likes words the way some men like weapons. He picks them up, weighs them, and then uses them to make people uncomfortable. But when he decided to build what he called a scent map, he treated Perfume the way he treated evidence at a murder scene, as a witness that could not lie, only fade. He did it the next morning. After his hour with the orchids, after breakfast, after Fritz had restored household dignity with coffee and the sound of plates behaving. Wolfe came into the office with the calm of a man who had just supervised a world that made sense, and he sat down as if he meant to impose the same discipline on murder. On the desk he arranged his materials. The jar containing the strip of safe felt, a small blotter of plain paper, a cloth, a bottle of tomorrow, I had acquired from Mercer's store with a receipt that made me feel morally questionable. Wolfe did not acknowledge the receipt. Wolfe thinks money exists to be converted into answers. He opened the bottle, sniffed once, and closed it again immediately, as if the scent were a rude guest. "It is rare," he said, "and it is controlled." "You can tell that from one sniff," I said. "I can tell it from the way it clings," Wolfe replied. "Cheap fragrance evaporates quickly. This adheres. It is designed to be remembered by strangers." I took the jar of felt and set it nearer. Mercer's safe remembered it. "Yes," Wolfe said, "and now we will make it confess chronologically." He touched nothing with bare fingers. Wolfe used tweezers, a small glass rod, and a patience that would have made a saint look restless. He dabbed the tiniest amount of tomorrow on one corner of the felt sample, timed it with the clock on the mantel, then dabbed the same amount on paper, then on cloth. He observed, smelled, and made notes in his small, precise hand. I watched. "This is the creepiest science fair I've ever attended." Wolfe did not look up. "Smell is chemistry. Archie, chemistry is obedient." "People aren't," I said. "That is why people die," Wolfe replied. After 40 minutes of what looked like a man bullying the air, Wolfe leaned back and set down his pen. The safe was perfumed within a window of approximately 5 to 7 hours before Mr. Mercer opened it, he said. I blinked. "That tight?" "Yes," Wolfe replied. "The intensity Mercer described, combined with your report of damp paper memory, requires it. It was not done at noon. It was not done 2 days earlier. It was done late, after the store closed." "Which matches the forged inventory check," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "And it matches the blank hour you will now investigate." He said it like he was ordering toast. That is Wolfe. So I went back to Mercer's department store that night. And if there is a place lonelier than a department store after hours, it is a department store security room with a man like Dane Cross trying to look innocent. Cross met me at the service entrance with the expression of a man being forced to swallow his own policy manual. "You again," he said. "I'm becoming a fixture," I replied. "Soon you'll have to dust me." He led me down a corridor where the walls were painted the color of fatigue and the air smelled of cardboard and floor wax. We reached the security room, a compact space stuffed with monitors, switches, and chairs designed to punish the spine. A bank of screens showed quiet views of the store, empty aisles, dead mannequins, and the perfume counter gleaming like a trap. Cross stood beside the console like a guard dog. I opened my notebook. "I want footage from the night the safe first smelled." Cross's jaw tightened. That was 2 nights before Mercer died. "Yes," I said, "from 10:40 to 11:30. Cross's eyes did not blink. "System glitch." I stared at him. "Funny, the rest of the night works like a choir." Cross's mouth hardened. "It happens." I leaned closer to the console, not touching, just letting my eyes do what Wolfe's nose did. The footage scroll showed a clean line of timestamps, then a gap, then a clean line again, a missing hour neatly excised. Nothing screams guilty like a missing hour. It's the kind of silence you have to pay for. I pointed at the blank spot. "Footage from 10:40 to 11:30 is gone," Cross repeated. "System glitch." I smiled. Glitches don't usually show up with combed hair. Cross's gaze stayed hard. "You implying I did it?" "I'm implying somebody did," I said. "And whoever did was comfortable enough in this room to do it without leaving you a panic attack." Cross's nostrils flared. "We're cooperating with the police." "You're cooperating the way a safe cooperates," I said, "by staying closed." Cross did not answer. His silence was tight, deliberate. I said, "Who else has access to this room?" Cross replied. My deputies, that's it. Names, I said. He gave them, clipped and resentful. I wrote them down and looked at the access log posted on a clipboard beside the console. Someone had signed in for a late-night inventory check near the perfume counter on the very night the safe first smelled. The entry was small and neat, written as if the writer had practiced not leaving personality. I read the name and felt my eyebrows rise. Cross saw it. That's routine, I said. Like perfuming a safe. He stiffened. I left him there with his glitch and went up to the main floor, where the perfume counter sat under soft lights, beautiful even in emptiness. A night clerk was restocking shelves with the slow resignation of a man who believed civilization was built on inventory. I showed him my credentials, which are mostly confidence, and asked about tomorrow. He glanced around as if the bottles might overhear. We keep it in a locked case, he said. Limited release, only Mercer's store carries it. So it's rare, I said. Rare and expensive, the clerk replied. Who handles it? I asked. He shrugged. Staff mostly, customers sample it, sure. But the only people who touch it all day are employees. Anybody buy a small bottle handbag size. The clerk's mouth tightened. Not customers. They buy the full bottle, the fancy one, but staff gets testers sometimes. Testers, I repeated. He nodded, uneasy. Tinny bottles. For training. For display. For a manager's pocket if they feel like it. Testers, small bottles. Easy to hide like lies, I asked. Who can authorize testers? The clerk swallowed. Perfumery manager. Sometimes the executive aide. If there's an event. Name, I said. He gave it, and it matched what Tessa Lane had told me. Names were starting to overlap the way fingerprints do when you press too hard. I went back to the brownstone with my notes and my irritation. Wolfe was in the office, waiting cigar lit, eyes half-lidded. The orchids upstairs were sleeping in their pots, smug and untouched by human foolishness. I laid it out. Footage from 10:40 to 11:30 is gone, I said. Cross says system glitch. The rest of the night runs perfect. There's a log entry for an inventory check near Perfume that same hour, and tomorrow is kept in a locked case. Customers don't buy testers. Staff gets them. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Therefore the bottle that fits a handbag is not a customer's purchase. No, I said. It's a staff privilege. Wolfe tapped his fingers lightly on the arm of his chair, and the missing footage is not a mistake. It's an alibi shaped like a blank spot, I said. Wolfe nodded once, pleased. Yes. The killer did not merely plan a theft. He planned the absence of proof. I leaned forward. So now what? Wolfe's mouth tightened in that way. That means he is already assembling a room full of people. Now, he said, we compel the people who had keys without having keys to explain why the clock is missing an hour. I stared at him. You're going to drag them to your office. I will invite them, Wolfe corrected. They will come because they prefer my chair to Inspector Kramer's. And if they don't, I said. Wolfe's eyes hardened. Then the next silence will not be purchased. It will be imposed. On Riddle Street, that is how you know the case has crossed the line from theft to murder. Not because the bodies pile up, though they do, but because even the gaps in a tape start looking like fingerprints. Chapter 8. The crystal that cut the truth the atomizer display had been dressed up as an accident, the way a department store dresses up a mannequin, carefully, tastefully, and with no respect for what is real. But accidents do not take the trouble to choose their scenery, and they do not leave fresh perfume on glass that has been sitting under lights all day. Wolfe had Kramer's people deliver the broken atomizer pieces in a sealed bag, which offended Fritz's sense of household cleanliness and pleased Wolfe's sense of order. The bag sat on Wolfe's desk like an unwelcome guest. Wolfe looked at it as if he could already smell the lies trapped inside. I stood near my desk with my notebook open. They're saying slip and fall, I said. Wolfe's eyes remained on the bag. They are saying what is convenient. I nodded. The bruises on Mercer's wrist weren't convenient. Describe them again, Wolfe said. I did. darkening on the inside of the right wrist. Oval, finger-sized. Not scraped, not cut, pressure, grip. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Restraint. Exactly, I said. Not a fall. Wolfe opened the bag with tweezers and removed one crystal base, holding it under the desk lamp. The glass caught light and threw it back in sharp angles. It looked delicate. It was not. Glass can cut without malice. Wolfe sniffed once, then set the piece down and took another. He moved with the care of a man performing surgery on a lie. He selected one particular base and held it closer, turning it slowly. Here, he said. I leaned in on the underside of the crystal. Near the rim, there was a faint smear, not visible at first glance, but under the lamp it showed as a thin sheen, slightly tacky. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Residue, Perfume, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied, and newer than the rest. I raised my eyebrows. You can date a smear now. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. I can distinguish fresh from old. The volatile notes remain. The odor is not merely present, it is active, I said. So someone had that atomizer in their pocket or palm, or on a cloth, Wolfe said. But yes, it was handled recently, and it carries the same fragrance. I sat back and felt the pattern tighten. Then the killer didn't just push Mercer into the display, they brought scent to the scene. Wolfe nodded. The perfume's presence on the glass shards was not incidental. It was applied at, or near the moment of death, close enough to transfer. That requires contact, a close encounter. I stared at the crystal. That means whoever killed him was right on top of him. Yes, Wolfe said, close enough to restrain his wrist. I tapped my notebook. The bruises match a grip from someone right-handed, strong, trained to restrain. Wolfe's eyes lifted. Trained. Security, I said. Cross has the build, the hands, the job. He could grab Mercer without making a scene. He could steer him to the perfume counter, like it was routine. Wolfe regarded me for a long moment, then said, Yes. I waited. Wolfe added, But Dane Cross is not the hand that designed this. I frowned. Wolfe's voice stayed mild, and that mildness was his knife. Security men are often employed to intimidate, not to innovate. This crime required invention, a forged request, a staged scent as a clock, a missing hour of footage, a replacement letter, a choreography of circumstance. I said, So Cross is muscle. A tool, Wolfe replied. That was your polite way of saying Cross could crack a walnut, but couldn't write the recipe, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Exactly. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The city was moving. Indifferent. Cars, pedestrians, noise. Somewhere inside that indifference was a person who had planned an alibi shaped like a blank spot and a murder shaped like an accident. I turned back. If Cross is a tool, who held him? Wolfe set the crystal down carefully. Someone who belongs, he said. Someone who can authorize a late-night inventory check, handle testers, forge internal requests, and move in the executive suite without raising alarms. Tessa Lane, I said. Wolfe did not confirm. But his silence sat in the room like agreement. Wolfe prefers to let the truth arrive as a consequence, not an announcement. I said, Lane could have Cross-escort Mercer. Cross restrains him. Lane provides the perfume, stages the scene, deletes the footage. Wolfe shook his head slightly. Not delete, arrange deletion. There is a difference. Many people can push a button. Few can ensure the absence is noticed and interpreted correctly. You mean, I said, the blank spot was meant for us. Wolfe's gaze hardened. It was meant for anyone who looked closely. It says, nothing to see. It is the oldest lie and the laziest. I looked at the crystal smear again. Then why bother with the perfume at all? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Because perfume is a witness that cannot be bribed. It speaks even when tape is missing. It ties the murder to the safe. It tells Mercer, or told Mercer, you are being handled. And it tells us, follow the scent, not the story. I chewed on that. So the killer, wanted the connection obvious. Yes, Wolfe said, but wanted the identity hidden behind obviousness. That is the trick, a false signature, a staged flourish. I said, Cross could have done the restraint, but he wouldn't decide to make tomorrow the calling card. No, Wolfe replied. He would carry out instructions. He would not invent them. I flipped a page in my notebook. Then we need to make Cross talk. Wolfe's mouth tightened. We will not persuade him with friendliness. He is loyal to structure, not to truth. So we use Kramer, I said. Wolfe nodded once. Inspector Kramer will enjoy questioning a security chief about missing footage, especially when the missing hour aligns with an invented inventory check. I grinned faintly. That'll make Cross's square answers look like they got rounded. Wolfe ignored my joke, which is what he does when the joke is correct. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the tray of evidence, felt, glass, the bottle of tomorrow, my notes. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were beginning to stack. Archie, he said. Telephone Inspector Kramer. Tell him I will receive Mr. Pike, Mr. Cross, Miss Voss, and Miss Lane tomorrow at 11. Tell him he will attend. Tell him to bring the store's internal logs and the names of those with access to the security system. I blinked. You're calling the meeting. I am arranging the lie to sit down, Wolfe said. I picked up the phone. And if they don't show, Wolfe's eyes hardened. They will. As I dialed, I glanced once more at the crystal base with its thin smear of scent. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but it had cut the story open and let the truth breathe. On Riddle Street, that is what sharp objects do. They do not just hurt, they reveal. Chapter 9. The Borrower Revealed. Wolfe sets traps the way Fritz sets a table, with calm precision and an assumption that everyone will behave, because the arrangement deserves it. The difference is Fritz expects gratitude and Wolfe expects confessions. Fritz usually gets more of what he expects. Wolfe told Inspector Kramer that he wanted a theft inquiry. Kramer made a sound like a man choking politely. A theft inquiry, Wolfe. I've got a dead department store owner, and you want to talk about shoplifting. Inspector, Wolfe said. Your imagination is a modest creature, feed it. Kramer came anyway, because he had run out of better choices, and because Wolfe has a way of making a man feel foolish for delaying the inevitable. Stebbins came too, looking pleased to be invited to something that might end with handcuffs. Wolfe also requested that Mercer's people attend, and he did it with the same mildness he used to ask for coffee. It was not a request. It was the shape of an order dressed in manners. At 7 that evening, they arrived in a sequence that felt like a payroll list. Harold Pike came first, polished as always, impatience tucked behind a professional smile. He took the chair to Wolfe's left, as if seats were assigned by seniority. Dane Cross came next, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes steady. He did not like being in Wolfe's office. He looked as if he preferred doors that he could control. Tessa Lane arrived with a folder and a guarded expression, efficient enough to be dangerous. She sat quietly, hands folded, eyes moving just enough to take inventory of the room. Nero Voss came last. She walked in calmly, as if arriving at a quarterly review. Her face was composed, her eyes steady, her posture neat. She looked like a woman who had learned that panic is expensive. Wolfe waited until the door closed behind the last of them, and I had taken my post by my desk. The office felt full, not of bodies, but of pressure. Even the brownstones seemed to listen. Upstairs the orchids were likely indifferent, but they had never been asked to justify an alibi. Wolfe did not waste time with greetings. He never does when he believes the greeting has already been answered by fear. Mr. Pike, Mr. Cross, Miss Lane, Miss Voss, he said. Inspector Kramer is present to observe and to act. Archie Goodwin is present to remember what you attempt to forget. Pike forced a smile. Mr. Wolfe, you said this was a theft inquiry. It is, Wolfe replied. A theft of paper and perhaps of decency. Sit still. Cross said nothing. Lane's eyes stayed on Wolfe. Voss looked at Wolfe's desk, at the items arranged there, and her gaze did not waver. On the blotter Wolfe had placed the bottle of tomorrow, the jar containing the strip of felt from Mercer's safe, and a large envelope. The envelope was sealed and labeled in Wolfe's neat hand. The label was a weapon disguised as stationery. Wolfe continued, voice calm, measured. Mr. Mercer possessed an unsigned letter of threat. It demanded payment to prevent exposure. He stated he locked it in his safe. Lane's chin lifted slightly. He mentioned a letter. Pike's eyes narrowed. We all heard rumors. Cross's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Voss said evenly, a letter proves nothing. Wolfe looked at her. Not yet an observation. It was not the original, because we did not have the original. It was a reconstruction Wolfe had created from what Mercer had told me, what Lane had told me, and what Wolfe could infer from the behavior around the safe. Wolfe does not need the original to make a trap. He only needs the right shape. I held it up, not theatrically, but high enough for everyone to see. Wolfe spoke softly. The letter was removed, copied, and replaced with an imitation. Mr. Mercer discovered that imitation only when he compared it with the original, which he had hidden elsewhere after first reading it. Pike scoffed. That's an accusation. Wolfe's eyes did not move. Not yet. An observation. He tapped the jar with the felt. The original was handled while damp with a particular fragrance. That fragrance was pressed against the safe lining in pressure bands. The forged replacement remained in the safe, but Mercer had already hidden the authentic letter elsewhere, which is why he began to suspect the deception. Cross's gaze flicked to the jar, then back to Wolfe. Wolfe turned his head slightly. Mr. Cross, you told Archie Goodwin that missing security footage was due to a system glitch. Cross's voice was flat. That's what it was. Wolfe nodded once. A convenient affliction. It arrived precisely for 50 minutes, then resolved. A rare, polite glitch. Stebbins made a small noise in his throat. Kramer's face tightened, but he stayed silent. Kramer was learning, slowly, that Wolfe's best weapon is letting other people talk themselves into a corner. Wolfe continued. The fragrance used was Tomorrow, a limited release. Rare, sold only at Mercer's store. Most customers buy full bottles. Small tester bottles are handled daily by staff. Lane's eyes flicked toward Voss. It was quick, controlled, almost nothing. But the flick had direction, and direction is information. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. The perfume is known for one note that persists longest. It remains on felt, paper, and glass after the brighter elements have faded. Miss Voss, you reacted when I mentioned it. Voss's expression did not change. Her eyes stayed calm, but her fingers, folded in her lap, tightened slightly, pressing thumb to forefinger, as if counting something she would rather not count. Nonsense, she said. I said mildly. Your pulse says otherwise. She looked at me then, and the calm in her eyes sharpened into calculation. Wolfe leaned back slightly, as if settling into a lecture he had already written. Miss Voss, you are the in-house accountant. You noticed forged requests. You handled approvals. You had access to internal logs. You also understood exactly what kind of exposure could ruin Mr. Mercer. When he compared the forged letter in the safe with the authentic one he had hidden elsewhere, he knew someone inside his circle had touched his fear and rewritten it. Voss's voice stayed steady. Understanding is not murder. No, Wolfe agreed, but it is opportunity. He lifted the bottle of Tomorrow with 2 fingers, as if it offended him. You wrote the threat letter to extort Mr. Mercer. You did not intend to steal his cash, you intended to control him. But you feared he would take the letter to counsel, or to me, therefore, you needed it removed and duplicated. Mr. Cross assisted you in access, and in erasing the camera hour. Cross's head snapped toward Wolfe. That's a lie. Wolfe's eyes went to him calm and cold. Mr. Cross, you are a security chief. You can enter rooms without invitation. You can authorize after-hours access. You can persuade employees not to remember what they saw, and you can touch a console. Cross's jaw clenched. I didn't kill him, Wolfe nodded. Number you held him. The room tightened. Lane's lips parted slightly, then closed. Pike shifted in his chair, as if the upholstery had become hostile. Cross's voice rose. "I never laid a hand on him." Wolfe's gaze did not flinch. Mercer's bruises were on the inside of his right wrist, pressure marks, finger pads, a right-handed grip from a strong hand trained to restrain. "You have such a hand, Mr. Cross. You also have the habit of restraint. You do not punch. You hold. You control." Cross's face reddened. "You can't prove that," Kramer said. "We can try." Wolfe did not look at Kramer. "This crime required invention," Wolfe said. "And you are not an inventor. You are an instrument. Miss Voss is the inventor." Voss's composure held for another second. Then, a thin crack appeared in it, the way thin ice cracks when you step on it with too much certainty. "You're building a story," she said, and the steadiness had gone slightly brittle. "A pretty story with perfume and felt." Wolfe's voice softened. "It is not pretty. It is accurate." He gestured toward the jar. The safe smelled loudly in the morning because the letter was returned, while still wet with tomorrow. The forged inventory check created the pretext for access near the perfume counter at night. The missing footage created the alibi shaped like silence. The staged death at the atomizer display created the narrative of accident and also allowed fresh scent to be transferred to the glass shards to reinforce the connection, Pike blurted. "Why would an accountant do that?" Wolfe glanced at him as if he were a chair making noise. "Because the letter was not merely a threat. It was a test. Miss Voss needed Mercer to respond, to pay, to reveal what he would protect, and she needed him quiet before he recognized that the letter in his safe was not the letter that had been delivered." Lane's voice came out sharp. "You can't know that." Wolfe's eyes shifted to her. "Miss Lane, you are loyal to the store, or to your own position. Either way, you have been guarding a secret with admirable discipline. Your eyes have repeatedly moved toward Miss Voss whenever tomorrow was mentioned. That is not loyalty to truth, that is fear of consequence." Lane went pale. She did not speak again. Wolfe looked back to Voss. "You wrote the original letter, then you needed it back, because an original is power, a copy is only performance. You replaced it with an imitation to keep Mercer calm while you decided your next move." Voss's eyes flashed. He was already suspicious. Wolfe nodded. "Yes, that is why he was killed. Not for money, not for vengeance, for timing." The word timing struck the room like a gavel. Voss's lips tightened. Her gaze dropped for the first time, not to the desk, but to the bottle of tomorrow. For a fraction of a second she looked at it the way a person looks at a tool they have used too often. Wolfe saw it. "When Mercer became suspicious," he said, "you lured him to the atomizer display, a place where a fall could be explained. You used Mr. Cross to restrain him, deadly pressure, quick collapse, staged fall." Cross sprang up half an inch from his chair, then stopped when Stebbins shifted his stance. Cross's face was furious, but it was also frightened now, and fear is the signal Wolfe had been waiting for. Voss's composure finally broke, not in screams, in a quiet, sharp exhale that sounded like surrender. "He was going to ruin everything," she said. No one spoke for a second. Not even Kramer, and Kramer loves noise. Then Wolfe said softly, "There it is." Voss lifted her chin, eyes wet but hard. "You don't understand. He didn't just own a store. He owned people. He owned their hours, their holidays, their dignity. He kept records. He kept things locked away and pretended it was virtue. He would have destroyed me." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "So you destroyed him." Voss's mouth twisted. "I wrote the letter because he deserved fear. I wanted him to pay. I wanted him to feel it." Kramer stepped forward, and the killing. Voss looked at him, and something in her face changed. Not remorse, but exhaustion. It wasn't supposed to be like that. Cross said we could scare him. Just push him. Just make him stop. He panicked. He grabbed my wrist. Cross grabbed his. He wouldn't let go. He stumbled. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And you made it finish." Voss's shoulders sagged. I sprayed the atomizer. I sprayed it on his collar, on the glass. I thought it would look like he had collapsed, like he had been dizzy, like he had slipped. Like an accident, I said. She nodded once. Small. Yes. Kramer's voice went hard. And the missing footage. Voss glanced at Cross. Cross stared at the floor now, jaw working, trapped by his own silence. I told him to remove it, she said. He did. Wolfe's voice was mild. Tools do what they are told. Cross finally spoke. Hoarse. I didn't know she was going to kill him. Wolfe looked at him with contempt so quiet, it felt polite. You erase time, Mr. Cross. Do not pretend you respect life. Kramer moved, and the room shifted from theater to law. Stebbins stepped in behind Voss. Kramer produced cuffs with the practiced efficiency of a man, grateful to stop listening. Voss did not resist. She sat very still while Stebbins took her wrists, and she looked at Wolfe with a strange mixture of anger and relief. You set us up, she said. Wolfe's eyes were steady. I arranged your lies so they could not bear your weight. Kramer jerked his head at Cross. You too. Up Cross's face tightened, and for a second I thought he might try something foolish. But the brownstone has a way of making even big men feel small when Nero Wolfe is watching. Cross stood stiff and Stebbins took him. Pike looked stunned. Lane looked sick. The office smelled faintly of tomorrow, because the bottle was still on the desk and because guilt always has a scent if you give it time. As the police took Voss and Cross toward the door, Wolfe looked at the jar containing the felt, as if it were a witness that had done its duty. A safe, Wolfe said, almost to himself, is not defeated by force. It is defeated by belonging. I exhaled slowly, so she borrowed the letter, replaced it, and killed him before he could compare. Yes, Wolfe said, and she used Perfume as a clock because she believed it would provide control. She forgot that a clock also measures. I watched Kramer and Stebbins disappear into the hall with their prisoners. The brownstone seemed to relax a fraction, as if it had been holding its breath with us. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, tomorrow, you will retrieve the original letter, if it exists. Miss Voss will have kept it. And if she didn't, I said, Wolfe's mouth tightened. Then she is even more foolish than I believe, and the consequences will find her anyway. I glanced at the bottle of tomorrow on the desk, such a small thing, pretty and expensive, used as a weapon and a calendar. On Riddle Street, the confession nobody wants to carry always falls eventually, not with drama, not with a flourish, but with a simple sound. Like ash dropped on a rug, and once it falls, it stains everything it touches. Chapter 10. The least modest witness after the police took Mira Voss and Dane Cross out of the brownstone. The house did what it always does when human noise is removed. It reclaimed itself, the hall settled. The stairs stopped listening. The office air became merely air again, not a stage for other people's fear. Fritz appeared because Fritz always appears when order is threatened and then restored. He looked at the scuffed corner of the rug where too many shoes had stood. Then at the ashtray where Wolfe's cigar was slowly turning into evidence of habit. It is finished, Fritz said. For tonight, I told him. Fritz's gaze went to Wolfe. Wolfe gave the small, formal nod that passes for reassurance in that house. Fritz left, satisfied enough to begin planning a breakfast that would restore civilization by force. Kramer had not left without a parting gift. He had paused in the doorway and looked back at Wolfe with the expression of a man who is annoyed at being grateful. You were right, he had said. Wolfe's eyelids had lowered. I am often right. Kramer had grunted, as if that were a personal insult, and then he had added, the store's going to blow up in the papers. That is inevitable, Wolfe replied. Scandal is merely publicity that has stopped pretending to be polite. Now the only sound in the office was the city beyond the windows, the steady breathing of New York. Cars, footsteps, a taxi horn, and somewhere a laugh that belonged to someone who had no idea a department store had just lost its reputation and its owner. I sat at my desk and looked at the objects Wolfe had arranged on his blotter. The bottle of tomorrow, the jar containing the strip of safe felt, A sheet of paper covered in Wolfe's neat notes about scent strength over time, the kind of chart that would make a chemist nod and a jury blink. "All that off a smell," I said. Wolfe did not look up. He was reading, because Wolfe reads when other men recover. "Yes," he said. "You ever get tired of being right?" I asked. "No," Wolfe replied. "I grow tired only of stupidity." "That's lucky," I said. "New York is a renewable resource." Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly, which was his version of conceding I was not entirely wrong. He set his book aside and looked at the bottle with faint disdain. "The perfume was not disguise," he said. "And it was not romance. It was a clock." I leaned back. "A clock that killed 2 people. A clock that revealed 2 people," Wolfe corrected. "The killing was done by hands. The clock merely measured them." I nodded toward the jar. "So walk me through it one last time slowly. I want to remember it without needing a nose." Wolfe's eyes narrowed in mild approval. Wolfe likes it when I try to be less of a nuisance. "The safe lining absorbed the fragrance unevenly," he said. "You observed the pressure bands. An object was pressed against the felt and held. Not brushed, not grazed. Held, that established method." "The letter," I said. "Yes, the letter," Wolfe continued. "A document was returned while still wet. You detected damp paper memory under the perfume. Mercer reported the odor appeared overnight and was loud in the morning. That established a narrow window." 5 to 7 hours, I said. "Approximately," Wolfe replied. "Not a perfect measurement, but sufficient." Scent fades predictably. The brighter notes diminish. First, the persistent note remains longer. That persistent note is what you smelled on the crystal shard at the murder scene and what I confirmed as fresh. I tapped my notebook, meaning the killer had handled the perfume recently. "Yes," Wolfe said. "A close encounter, restraint transfer. Scent does not leap politely across a room. It moves by contact, by proximity, by carelessness." "And then," I said, "the missing hour." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "The missing camera hour confirmed opportunity. If the swap occurred during that window, and the footage is absent precisely during that window, then the absence is not accident. It is intention. An alibi, shaped like silence." I smiled faintly. "Nothing screams guilty like a missing hour." Wolfe nodded once. "Exactly. The forged inventory check created the pretext. The missing footage created the blank. The bottle that fit a handbag created the clock. Miss Voss provided the motive and the plan. Mr. Cross provided access and force." I looked toward the door, and Pike and Lane, "Cowardice and convenience," Wolfe said. "They knew enough to be uneasy and not enough to be courageous. They will suffer the store's scandal, which is a punishment suited to their virtue." I rubbed my chin. Nero Wolfe wrote the original letter to extort Mercer. Then she forged a replacement after Cross helped her get into the safe. Mercer started to suspect. She lured him to the atomizer display and used Cross to restrain him. Quick collapse. Staged fall. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. "Yes, and the perfume," I said, "was meant to point anywhere but at her." "It was meant to be obvious," Wolfe replied. "Obviousness is the simplest camouflage. People see it and stop looking." I exhaled. "But you kept looking." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Because the perfume was too deliberate. A signature is vanity. This was management." I gestured toward the bottle. "So the least modest witness." Wolfe's voice went quieter, which is when it gets memorable. "Smell never blushes. It never forgets. It never lies, unless someone does first." I nodded. "You said that already." "Then you should remember it," Wolfe replied. I sat for a moment listening to the city. Outside, Riddle Street kept breathing, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, the brownstone held its calm, as if murder were a rude guest who had finally been shown the door. "What happens to Mercer's store?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "It will continue, with different owners, different apologies, and the same cash drawers. The aisles will remain bright. The scandal will dim them briefly." Mr. Mercer feared exposure. He received it. That's almost poetic, I said. It is almost just, Wolfe corrected. I looked at the jar of felt again, the strip that had held a pressure band like a fingerprint. Funny, I said. How a man can lock his life in steel and still get robbed by a smell. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, cigar smoke rising in a thin, disciplined line. Locks protect objects, he said. They do not protect men from themselves. I stood stretched and felt the week settling into place at last, like a suit you do not love but can tolerate. On Riddle Street, you remember what keeps you alive, and what kills you tends to leave a scent behind if you know how to listen with your nose.